There we are. Saved my life. I am working. I'm working solo today, so please forgive me if I seem to jump around a little bit. I'm trying to let people in and present and chat at the same time. So before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge that I live, work and play on Wadandi Noongar Boodja, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I extend that deep respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders on the call today and acknowledge their connection, their enduring connection to land, sea and sky. Please feel free to jump into the chat and acknowledge what country you're joining us from today too. I would also like to acknowledge WA Landcare Network's funders, being the State NRM program and the National Landcare Network. So I'd like to introduce our guest speakers today. Each of them will present for 5 to 10 minutes, and that will leave lots of time for questions and also a general discussion on the topic as well. So first up, we're going to hear from Peta Lierich, Biodiversity Officer and Weed Specialist from Nature Conservation Margaret River region, about how groups can tackle their weed issues and how nature cons are working with nearby residents and local council to ensure that reinfestation of reserves is minimised. And we'll also be joined by Peta Goodwin, Margaret River local as well, from Friends of Barrett Street Reserve, who is passionate about tackling weeds in her patch. You can hear about how this small group has planned weed control activities, harnessed external volunteer labour and made an impact, even engaging an artist to raise community awareness of common weeds within the reserve. So I'm going to hand over first to Peta Lierich. So thanks so much for joining us today, Pete.
Great, thank you. It's fantastic to be here. Should I share my screen now? Or, yeah?
Yes, please.
Yeah. There we go. In a sec. There we go. Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's really great to join you all today. I'm also speaking to you from Wadandi saltwater country, and also want to acknowledge the deep cultural connection the Wadandi people have to our rivers, our oceans and our bushland, and the care of country that they have done for thousands of years and they continue to do. So I'm going to talk about the seemingly insurmountable burden of introduced weeds in our bushland reserves and how to plan and prioritise managing these weeds from a friend's perspective, I suppose. And I think we all have a responsibility to manage weeds. It can often be left up to land managers, but we all need to chip in. We all need to work as a community because the problem is so large, and it's a really valid quest to undertake. And so some of the Friends of Reserves volunteers, they are undertaking this quest, and it's an amazing example, and it's a really great privilege to be on here with Peta Goodwin and the work that she does with Maureen Munro and countless others in our area to do this amazing work. And I look forward to paying my dues and becoming a friends or joining a friends group when I have a little bit more time on my hands. So really effective environmental weed management for biodiversity protection really needs to be strategic, as the problem is so big and the available resources really are quite little. So a strategic approach is really required, and we need to prioritise our activities. So the first step, let's see, there we go. The first step in this process for planning weed management, I would say, is having really clear goals and guiding principles. For those of us who look at weeds a lot, we're out on country, we're checking out weed infestations, we're controlling weeds, we can kind of get this thing I called weed tunnel vision. where we just have this great urge to just get rid of them all. And we really want to just get stuck into it. We have great intentions and great motivation, and we just want to remove all the weeds. But often we have to step back and sort of look at the bigger picture and have a little think about what we're trying to achieve here, and really think about what is our goal and how are we going to achieve it. Because you can spend a lot of time and a lot of effort getting in there and having the best intentions and getting stuck into weed control. And then the next year, you're doing the same thing and the same thing again. So having those clear goals and guiding principles are really what we want to have. And a goal might be, for say a Friends of Reserves group, would be, often it is protection of those best assets. And that might be your best condition bushland areas. And that's where you might want to push back some of those weeds that are creeping into those good condition areas. And that will sort of guide some of your weed actions. And once you've done that for a few years, you might start to, another goal might be to address a seed source that starts to, that is constantly reinfesting those good conditions. And that's where you might tackle some of those bigger areas of weed infestations. Some other goals that you might have, there might be some fire risk in a reserve. You might have large woody weed problems. I know some of them around here with our summer drought, a lot of them have died. They've become a sort of a fuel ladder or fire ladder up into the canopy. So that might be a goal where you need to go in and start to address them. And you might just prioritise those weeds over others. And some guiding principles that you want to keep in mind is prevention is better than anything. So you want early detection of these weeds. You want to get in there and prevent them from becoming this massive weed burden. And so you've got to put in so many resources to get on top of it. And most of our weed problems require a long-term commitment. And that's where you want to do a little bit for a long time. So you get those really great successes as opposed to tackling those really large infestations for a short amount of time. And then often down the track, you've got to revisit it. And then it's just resources down the drain. And when you have these clear goals and guiding principles, they really set or guide your work and set the pace of how quickly you can start to manage that. Yes. So this is an example of some work that I was involved in where I didn't have a very good clear goal of what I was doing. This is actually Barrett Park in the city of Freo, where I, about 12 years ago, I worked, and we started doing some weed control in this park, and it was, there was quite an issue there. It was newly sort of starting to become a reserve and used for recreation, but it had a lot of issues. It was an old quarry site and a dump site, and it had a lot of weeds. And I had weed tunnel vision. I got in there, I was full of enthusiasm, and I just started killing weeds. And I found the next year I was doing the same thing, and the year after. And I was getting nowhere. And I know a lot of you might feel this way. You start becoming very disheartened, and you sort of think like, well, what's the point? Or where am I getting with this? And that's where you've got to look out at the bigger picture and have that clear goal and think, okay, what am I trying to achieve? I want to work from the best areas, so we're starting to get some successes and work from there. So that's an example of a little bit of a failure of mine. So the next part of really starting to prioritise some of your weed control, if you're part of a friends group, and you've got that sort of guiding principle, that goal of protecting your natural assets, you really want to start from your best areas. But sometimes we just don't know where they are. And that's where you want to work with your local government or some of your local land managers and see if they have any of these great management documents, and you can use them to help guide you. I know, so this is the Shire of Denmark. They've recently just brought out a new weed strategy, and they've mapped all their reserves and classified all their bushland. And this is a great document that people could use if you had something similar, where you can prioritise your areas and you can work from the best areas. For example, the blue bit, that's your excellent condition areas, and then you've got your very good condition. And then you can sort of go, okay, so we're going to protect our excellent, and then we're going to start sort of working along these edges and make sure that we keep it in excellent condition. If you don't have access to some of these documents, and maybe sometimes you don't have access to the digital tools, you can actually create them yourselves. And it's a really great engagement tool that some of the friends groups can do together. So this is a hand-drawn map of Ellenbrook Homestead, and it's quite old, but it's kind of like a heat map of vegetation condition. And it can be used to prioritise work still. And these are easily done. And it's a great way to get out on country, engage your members, and start to prioritise your work as well. So once you've kind of got, you want to start from your best condition areas and you start to get a good idea of your vegetation condition, you kind of want to know what is there. And that's when you want to start doing some weed surveys. And this is a really good way as well. So you put the two together, work from your good conditions area, and then you figure out what is there and how bad is it, and how can you go about it. So, for example, this is an arum lily map, and this is a reserve, and you can kind of see some of the densities of the map. And if you had access, or you have created some of these maps, you can start to prioritise some of these works by starting to tackle some of these isolated or scattered arum lilies on the edge here, and start pushing it back into that sort of centre extensive dense infestation. And then over time you can start thinking about this large dense infestation and start thinking about that seed source, because that's going to constantly reinfest your good quality bushland. And you want to sort of manage that over a number of years so that you don't bite off too much, so that you can't, too much that you can chew. And then you have those really good successes. Another example of, if you don't have tools that can create these maps, you can also do you can do a hand-drawn map. And this is just one that sort of shows you all the different densities of arum lily as well. But you can also just print out, say, a Google satellite image and hand draw over that. And these are a really good way that you can start to get that baseline information of your reserves and work with your group and start to sort of prioritise the areas and think about, does this protect our good condition? Are we working in a strategic way? And keep coming back to a goal. One tool we have developed to aid weed mapping is this field book app. And the app really was designed as a tool to engage the community in weed monitoring and surveillance in the southwest. And we found that from a management perspective that weed maps are an essential tool to identify high priority areas, but the process of developing a weed map can be really labour intensive, and it's expensive and require frequent updating as well. So, knowledge is power, and using our interested community to collect this information in a standardised way can enable us to map weeds on a regional scale, and then we can feed this information back to friends of groups, local government, and that can help prioritise work. And, it really is a great engagement tool that we have found that has really enabled the local community to get out there and start to sort of, get on board. And this is a little bit of an example of the field book in action. So you can kind of see, this is Malloy Island down in Augusta, and there's a bunch of residents, really active residents down there that are really supported by our local shire of Augusta Margaret River, and they have mapped a few of the woody weeds down there, and you can kind of see, this is residential area, and there's a bit of a cluster of Sydney golden wattle in this area, and we've got a reserve here. And so we're sort of collecting this information, we can kind of see, okay, so woody weeds in these landholder area and this little cluster could start impacting a little bit more into these reserves. And that might mean that we should start to sort of get a bit of a collaboration going. And it really does help us and everyone else prioritise their work. So, okay, so the next step, I think, in starting your prioritising and getting a bit of a plan would really be to start some integrated control and really foster some partnerships. So there's lots of information about treatment of weeds, so I'm not really going to go into that too much, but partnerships and collaboration is so important, and it also builds like an engaged community, a feeling of empowerment, and when there are shared successes, it's really great. So you can kind of get together and gather around those shared successes. And sometimes there's shared failures. So you can kind of, buffer against those as well, which is really great. And, in this picture, there's almost 4 different organisations. We have our wonderful Hayley Bain, who's a part of Shire of Augusta Margaret River, and she supports a lot of the Friends of reserves groups down here. She does a fantastic job. We have the U3A group, we have the Friends of Barrett Street Weir, we have Nature Conservation, and they're all coming together for a shared vision and that fight against invasive weeds on their local patch. And this is where you can kind of get some really good work happening when you start to sort of get multiple groups involved in an issue, maybe around your reserve, and that they can start to spread the word and it starts filtering out into the community. There's a real sense of well-being as well when you start going down that pathway. Now, another partnership that is quite valuable, I suppose, for a Friends of Reserve group would be that partnership that you would have with your local government and say you're a land care or an NRM group, because one barrier sometimes to successful weed control is often access to that technical information on weed control and chemical application. So this is where you've got those really large infestations that might be overwhelming for a friends group to tackle, and that really need that integrated approach, and they might need some chemical application. That's where you can bring in your a local bush regenerator and partner with them, learn from them, and they can come in and do some of those big jobs, work alongside you, and then your friends groups can come in behind them and monitor the success of that, come in following years and start to do a little bit of a mop-up, I suppose, of any seedlings that are starting to pop up after that control. And that can be a really great partnership that can feed both ways. So again, if we're thinking about, this is a little bit of a case study, and we're thinking about partnerships and coordinated approach. You want to think about your bigger picture as well. And so a lot of the work that we do is try and engage as many groups around so that we get the best bang for our buck. And the Shire of Augusta Margaret River has done some great work in Davies Reserves down in Carradale. It's a really important reserve. It's got a lot of historical significance, but it did have a huge weed burden, and they've done a fantastic job. But it was, there was a lot of weeds there, and there was a lot of weeds from the adjoining landholders as well. So it really needed that coordinated approach, because you can put a never-ending amount of resources, that's human and dollars, into weed control, into your reserve, but you have a huge source of seed from neighbouring properties. It'll continue to keep on reinfesting your reserve, and it'll just be a fighting battle. So that's where we all need to work together to try and get that sort of shared outcome. And that's where collaboration with, your local land managements, your LGAs, NRM groups, and you can sort of foster those partnerships, can be really, really good. And so, for example, this one included a decent amount of work from the local Shire of Augusta Margaret River. We also engaged, the main roads were also engaged. It had a lot of dollar-cost pea, there was arum lily, there was some woody weeds. So we needed everyone on board. And so main roads came on board. And then there were also 5 landholders surrounding the reserve that came on board as well and did a lot of work. And they've done that work for a number of years. So this project needs probably, you know, an ongoing program for a long time. So hopefully it keeps going. Okay. Finally, the part that often gets left out, but can be a pretty enjoyable act in itself, or I find it quite enjoyable, is the monitoring and the data collection. I think it's an essential part, and sometimes, you know, friends groups might think that it's, you know, they might not have time for it, but it really does feed back into those successes, and it really gives information to your local government as well, and all the other land managements, because you guys are often on the ground learning things, and, you know, you're feeding information to all of us, and it can be so valuable. So the first easy thing that everyone can do is photo point monitoring, and it's fairly easy, but it does need a little bit of thought, because I have done some pretty bad photo monitoring points in the past, where I've gone out and taken 50 photos and then gone back the next year and I cannot find those spots. So it needs a really good thinking of some landmarks in your photos and some really distinct, say, vegetation. And sometimes you go back and the tree has fallen over, that is your landmark. So you've got to sort of think about these things. It's really great sometimes if you can have like a roadside, or there's sometimes a little shed or something like that in the background that can really help orientate it. And so another thing I like to do is I take a record of the direction of the photo that I've taken, and it's really good to either use a star picket or maybe a survey peg. And you can kind of see in these photos, this is some dollar cost pea control that was done a couple of years ago down in Carradale. And there's a little star picket or a survey peg at the front that was used, and it really does demonstrate some really good control. And then you can feed this back into your friends group internally, and that's a really great success story. But then you can also share it with your local government and all the other NRM groups as well. And another example of collecting data is back down in this Davies Reserve area. So you can take these photo point monitoring, but it's always really good to collect information on what weeds you've controlled, the techniques you've used, and how long you spent controlling them. And you can kind of keep a bit of a spreadsheet of that and build on that year after year, and you can start to sort of see a bit of a pattern and see how that maybe it's decreasing, or maybe that didn't work, and that sort of feeds back into this adaptive management sort of process. And you know, these are really good to share with your group members, and it's a great engagement tool to empower the group and bring the people along for the journey. So I might have gone a little bit over time, but I do just want to thank all the, thanks for having me, and all the friends group out there that are doing all this amazing work. You're so unbelievably valuable. I would like to thank our local governments, the City of Bushland and the Shire of Augusta Margaret River. You guys do a fantastic job managing all of the local reserves, and all the community members out there. So yeah, that's my little bit.
Awesome, Pete, legend. That was really, really valuable presentation. Thank you. I'm going to hold off questions until the end. I am going to share my screen, and I'm going to get Peta Goodwin to jump in and have a chat now. So just bear with me. And I think I've got to go back to the start. Can you guys see that okay? we go. All right, Peter, if you wanted to unmute yourself, I'm ready for you to jump in.
Okay.
Got someone mowing the lawns in the background there?
What was that?
Have you got someone mowing the lawns in the background?
Oh, can you hear it? Yeah, well, they're actually down the road.
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
right.
I can't do anything about that. Can you hear me?
We can, Peter. Off you go.
Thanks, Peta Lierich. That was a great talk. I noticed you used a lot of the photographs that I could have used but didn't. That's good. I'd just like to say thanks for inviting me. And I wanted to talk today about a special project that we did. I'll give you a bit of background first. I'm one of the Friends of Barrett Street Reserve. So far, there's only two of us, myself and Maureen. And we have a lot of trouble. Well, first of all, the reserve is a tiny reserve. It's only 17 hectares, an A-class reserve. It's right in the middle of town. The south side of it borders a residential area, and the north side borders DBCA badly managed pine forest. And the river goes through the middle, the Margaret River. It's also quite unique in that it has a very steep slope going down to the river. And lots of roads run out onto a road that goes parallel to it. So we have a lot of water erosion, and we have weed infestation from gardens. We have water erosion, which carries seed down into the reserve. And there's a lot of activity in the reserve, a lot of walkers, a lot of bicyclists, people with wheelchairs, people with prams. So it's a very well-used reserve, very public. And people think it's beautiful, and it is a beautiful reserve, but people think it's a very clean reserve, and it's actually full of weeds. We have a great deal of trouble finding people to help us weed. Weeding, you probably know this, anybody who's in a friends group, that weeding's just not sexy. Everybody wants to plant trees. You know, you have a tree planting and you get a crowd of hundreds, especially here with kids and everything, but weeding, you get 2 people turn up. And so we thought, we were discussing this, and we just one Sunday went to the Sculptures in the Bay at Dunsborough, and we saw this amazing plant made out of plastic bottles. This is it here. And it was called Insidious. And at first we didn't see it. And then we saw it and we thought, oh, look, there it goes down there and there. And so we approached the artist who was there, because we just had an epiphany and thought we could really use this to get some interest in weeds, and to also make people see that revegetation is not just about planting. It's about weeding as well. You've got to get rid of the weeds before you can actually expect the bush to grow. So we saw a great opportunity here. So we one of the artists was at the sculpture exhibition. So we didn't know it was her. We approached her and said, you know, could we get in touch with the artists about this piece? And because we could see we could use it. And she said, oh, when we'd explained what we wanted, she said, look, I'm one of the artists. So we ended up working with the artists, Eloise Roberts and Moira Phoebe, and doing this really good project. I just have to put in a bit of a plug for them at the moment. They've got an open studio in Margaret River, so you can go there and actually see some of this exhibit, but also the rest of their work, which is amazing. Anyway, so we put together a proposal, and I've got notes all over the place here, so I'll just read this. It was to create and install an artwork called Insidious at the entrance to Barrett Street Reserve that will be in place for a period of 6 months over summer. And we put it in October last year and pulled it out in March this year. The ongoing presence of the installation, plus the accompanying informative signage and leaflets, which Casey will show in a minute, will allow walkers, local groups of school groups or friends groups, and visitors to the River Precinct, the Old Settlement and Rotary Park, which are attached to the reserve, and they're not part of the reserve, but they certainly influence how it's used and what happens there. So it will allow them to learn more about how weeds, which are plants in the wrong place, affect biodiversity, and to educate them on how to develop weed eyes, because we realised that people can't see weeds. They just see green and they think it's beautiful bush. But like some of the feedback we had after this project was completed was that people said, oh, you've completely ruined our lovely walks in the bush now. All we can see are weeds. So it really achieved its objective in that regard. In discussion with the artists, they suggested we make it a community project, so in order to engage more people, because we had several things we wanted to do. We wanted to get rid of the weeds, but we wanted to engage more people in understanding the problem and that it needs to be dealt with. So we had a couple of workshops which the artists ran, and where community members created all those plastic flowers you see, and they were made out of recycled bottles, soft drink bottles. So in doing that, we engaged the Margaret River Refund. They put out a bin with a project of the month on it, and people could put their bottles for recycling in there, and instead of us getting a refund for them, we got the bottles. So because we had such difficulty finding bottles, which is good because it's showing that there's people are recycling them, which is excellent. So we engaged them, and then we, first of all, what did we do? So we had the workshops, we built 30 meters of vine, and then we put it up and we had a launch. Can you flick that to the sign? Oh, that was just the invitation to the workshops. Can you? Yeah, and then we got the sign made. Let me see. Can I move that arrow? No. Oh, can I? The left-hand side of it with the word insidious on was about the project and the artists, and the other side of it was actually about the weeds that we were targeting. We wanted to get people to be able to identify at least 5 major weeds. There's many more than that, but 5 are very prevalent. So we've now taken down the left-hand side of that big notice and just left the weed ID there. Then that can stay there forever, really. And we had a whole lot of leaflets made, which, can you show them, Casey? Yeah. Just explaining, and on the flip side was the thing we did. We had 1,000 leaflets made, and we've got 200 left. So 800 went out, which is pretty good. And we didn't see any sign of them being thrown on the track or anything. We had about 80 people attend the workshops, and some people just came both days and stayed all day and made thousands of flowers and got really quite artistic with them. So that was, and we talked about the project to them and talked about weeds, and most of them were fairly aware of what we were trying to do and were very keen. And others were just a whole lot of kids who came in and did it and learnt lots, I think, which was good. Then we had a launch, and we had about 35 people there. And we did a walk and talk weed walk. And Nature Conservation actually had a guy, Mike Griffiths, who was working there on the Woody Weed project that Peter talked about. And he came and did a lot of work with us. Actually, we worked very closely with Nature Conservation on this and the Shire. And they were very supportive of it because it sort of slotted into what they were doing as well. So we had a weed walk and talk at the launch. And then a couple of weeks later, we had a weeding blitz down on the foreshore, to which we got quite a few people. And we actually pulled up over 100 Pittosporum seedlings in a really small area on that day, which was fantastic. Then we had a Valentine's Day bleeding heart hunt. One of the weeds, the bleeding heart, is very prolific in the reserve, and there are a lot of trees around town that contribute to this. So we had a bleeding heart hunt, which was really quite well attended, and we did a lot of work on that. So that's what we did. And also we had U3A came down, and we did a weed and walk talk with them as well. And because of the work we were doing, a lot of people stopped and chatted to us. when they see a group of people weeding, they stop and ask. So we were able to give them leaflets and refer them to the sign at the end of the track. And we also got the people in the nearby Rotary Park Old Settlement and the bike shop that's there engaged as well. So we did the guy in the bike shop actually got the bikers to come in and weed out the front of his place. And in doing that, we sorted out who was responsible for what part of this precinct, which is at the entrance to our town. And it was getting very weed overrun because people didn't know who could do the weeding there. And friends groups generally don't go and just do weeding unsupervised. So it was we had to make clear who was managing it. And Nature Conservation was managing some of it, the Shire was managing some of it, and DBCA was managing other bits of it, and some bits nobody knew who was managing them. So we sorted all that out. And we, where am I up to? Sorry, with my notes here. That which was one of the side results of what we did, which was very good to have done, and engage new people that hadn't been engaged before, like the bikers. We actually worked out a way to get rid of vinca, which is also one of our 5 plants at the end here. Oh, I can't point this one, which we manually weeded it, and we did a trial run. It worked, so we were able to get rid of a big patch of that all at once, which has been fabulous. So the results of our doing this project, we didn't have any negative feedback at all about it, although some people souvenired bits of the vine, I think. But generally, the feedback on it was really positive. People said it was really good to use art as a way to increase awareness. They liked that idea. The weed eyes that people got, people commented on that, and that was really good. The action on the rest of the site was good. We had some feedback from a local scout leader and from Dr. Peta Lierich from Mindful Margaret River, which is a mental health awareness group in town. They said that the installation and the leaflets provided excellent information which fed discussions in their groups. And the Scouts actually organised a weeding session with the Shire and went ahead and did one themselves. And we got a lot of weeds pulled. And we actually got some more members for our group, which was really good, because that was one of our aims, was to get more people interested in weeding. So I'd agree with Peter that getting other groups involved and working together collaboratively is really important. We've now, we had a few ideas that came out of this, which were, Peter mentioned the weed mapping, and the other thing she didn't mention actually was the weed information on the Shire website. We wanted a QR code so that people could go and find more information out about these weeds and about other weeds that they saw. And we were able to kind of, I suppose, put a bit of impetus behind what the Shire was already doing with that, and that they've now got quite a good site going, which is constantly being added to, and they're working with the Wildflower Society on that. So that's a really good source of information. We're looking at providing new and old residents with an information pack about plant species that can become weeds, and good Indigenous plants suitable for gardens. And Peta Lierich has actually worked with me with my other hat on, which is the Margaret River Regional Environment Centre, on that. And we've got a demonstration garden set up there, so people can come and see what Indigenous species look like when they're growing, and choose to put them, we hope they'll choose to put them in their gardens rather than weedy species or species that are exotic and could become weeds. They don't all do that. We also want to work with local nurseries and plant sellers to label potential weed plants in nurseries with a warning message, because a lot of these are okay in Perth, but they're not okay in the southwest. and they're still sold. What was the other thing? Oh, yes, we had a lot of discussion around setting up a native plant nursery. There was one already in town, but the owners wanted to retire, so they've virtually donated their business to the community now, and we're going to set up a community nursery and grow plants that are good to have in your gardens. And we're also supplying nature conservation and the Shire with the plants they need for re-veg. I think that's about it.
Peter, I might leave it there.
Yeah.
Talk about superwoman or women to be able to go from 2 people working in a reserve to having all of that go down, and finding such a creative way to draw attention to a problem that most people that don't work in the industry don't see from day to day. So a huge well done to you. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm going to just stop sharing my screen so I can see all of your beautiful faces, and I'm going to just throw it out to the group if anyone has any questions for the lovely Peters. I have a question. What about using, when we're talking about mapping, I'm just thinking about things that might be accessible to others. Does anyone use My Maps, like Google My Maps, and have it on that aerial view so that you could look down and sort of zoom in on the vegetation and stuff through My Maps? Because I use that a lot, and I found it to be really user-friendly.
Yeah. I use that sometimes, absolutely. I think that's I'm glad you asked that question, because it was on my list of things to say. Google My Maps is a great way if you don't have any other sort of app or anything like that. It's and it sort of keeps it all there, and absolutely, it's a great way.
Awesome, thanks, Peter. Brian, yes, I believe it will be possible to circulate the presentations if both Peters agree to send those out to participants today. That shouldn't be a problem. Michelle has just asked, is the weed mapping app something that's available to others, Pete?
Oh, it's actually available to everyone. I suppose the only thing is we're managing the database kind of in the Capes or Margaret River region, which is sort of Busselton, Augusta, that whole area. So we're managing the database for that, but anyone can download it. And on our website, there's instructions on how to download it. You can't get it from the App Store. It's a web-based app. But basically anyone has access to it, and we can share the information with everyone.
I'll when I do the post-event email with the recording, I'll make sure I include a link, everyone.
Great. Yeah.
Colma, you've got your little virtual hand up there.
Thanks. Thank you, both of you. And I really love the reminding us about the bush regeneration side of focusing on the areas that are the best areas and looking after those, and then moving out from that. And then a question about the art side of things. I was just wondering, because of the work that was done to collaborate with those artists, have you found that is ongoing now, or have you got some tips on how we might go about linking into some of those artists?
Oh, yeah, we've still got a good relationship with them, actually. They're looking for new community projects, so you could certainly link into these artists personally. With the vine, we've got 7 bags of it if you want to borrow it or have it. We will recycle it eventually, but we wanted to, we first of all wanted to see if anyone else wanted to use it in their reserve. You'd have to create your own signage, obviously, because ours was particular. But so if you want the contacts of those artists, I can give them to you. But you may have, I don't know where you guys are, but you may have some local artists that want to do community art projects. Schools are one of the Eloise Roberts, who was one of the artists who made the vine, she's actually an art teacher at the local primary school. So they're always quite keen on projects, especially ones that are environmental art projects, because it gets them out doing two things at once, you know, or more than that. But
Colma, do you have sculptures by the bay? Do they do that up in Freo or something? It seems familiar to me.
They had, sorry, that's the same, I think the same artists were at the, what's it called? It's the one at Rockingham, the recycled art.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rockingham. And sorry, Grecian had
Sometimes it's quite useful if you are inviting people to come on a weeding session to actually make herbarium. So everybody, and you just have target weeds. So you've got a press sample of the green part of the weed, you've got the flower and maybe the seed. And often it's worthwhile just to say to people, just target one weed. And in that way, you've got less collateral damage, as we say, by doing that. Just a tip, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Colma, I'll put you in contact with Peta Goodwin in an email afterwards. Mr. Bigg, sir.
Hi. Yes, I wondered if we've got a real problem in the reserve next to us, Broadwater Reserve, with grass. And I just wondered if anyone had experience. And the sort of things that happen, we went in and removed some woody weeds, and all the tracks that we put in to get the woody weeds out have now created an inroad for grass to spring up. And I just wondered if anyone had experience controlling grass, the annual grasses. You know, there's a range of them. It's mostly ryegrass, hugely aggressive, but a number of other grasses as well. And I don't want to spray, but I just wondered if anyone had ideas on controlling it without opening it up and letting other horrible weeds in that we don't want either.
It is a common thing, isn't it? Particularly under those woody weeds, you find they're like transformer weeds. They start to sort of transform the structure of the bushland. You know, and they're nitrogen fixing, which is great for those grasses to start to come in and colonize that area. It's a bit of it is a massive issue. I understand. Do you know, in your area, say you've done some control, has there been any efforts to control? You obviously open it up, there's a lot of sunlight. Any efforts to sort of do any remediation around that?
I've tried sort of pulling out or hoeing small patches. It's so widespread, it's a huge problem, but I'm a bit overwhelmed at this stage. But maybe it's something, if we get a few friends together and just keep at it, just keep working away. And I guess one of the things is you can't leave an open space, so it's finding something else that will grow in it and outcompete the grasses. But it seems like a formidable foe.
Yeah, it becomes overwhelming, doesn't it? Yes. Yeah, I completely understand. Yeah, and I suppose that's, you know, you want to work from your edge. I know it's the standard principles, but sometimes you need, like, each site has its own unique sort of problems that need. Maybe we can chat one-on-one after this.
All right.
And and if
Okay, we'll take it offline.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks,
Pete,
Peter.
Bill's working up in the Cape Nat area, so really close to you. So it'd be great to connect with Bill anyway on his new project. There's a question here from Jane Bremer. She's part of a Friends of group, looks like Friends of Success Hill Reserve. Has the issue of veldt grass control methods or PFAS pesticide impacts come up for anyone?
Well, I suppose what is the actual question?
Veldt grass control methods. Would you like to expand on that, Jane?
I'd make a comment. Veldt grass is a clumping grass, so it's probably a bit easier to physically control than some of the other, particularly ryegrass type grasses. So
Hi, Jane. Did you want to expand there?
Yeah, veldgrass is actually one of the most serious weeds in the urban environment. And not all grasses are the same. Veldgrass is in a league of its own, highly invasive and highly prolific, particularly after fires. So in the urban environment, which is where my friend's group and reserve is, veldgrass is the most invasive species and the most problematic species. So my question was twofold, because often the solutions that the NRM sector or local governments put towards veldgrass is simply to spray pesticide like fusilade fort. We took a different approach because we are a non-chemical ecological. We're taking a mosaic approach to our weed management, and we're finding that complete removal of the, depending on the situation, because every site and every context is different, but in heavily infested areas where the veldgrass is quite large clumps, we've found the most effective way is to dig out those large clumps and actually remove them completely. And what we've shown is that over the years, the seed bank that's left in the soil is when those seedlings come up, they're a lot easier to manage. The problem with the big clumps of veldgrass is the seeds fall down and kind of catch and then they re-sprout from this massive clump continuously. So we found the most effective way was to remove it, but it's an ongoing case of having to pull out the small veldgrass. The reason I really wanted to raise the issue, because we're quite happy with the way that we're going and we're seeing really good results. And you're absolutely right, you have to plant heavily afterwards so that it doesn't recolonize. But I'm concerned about the use of fortnight. I'm concerned that we don't see this really serious issue.
Jane, I'm sorry, you keep cutting in and out.
Sorry about that. Maybe
the sound's quite bad on, so I might just leave it there, if that's okay. Was there anyone else that had any other questions?
I'm happy about that. That's not very nice to just cut me off there and
no, actually, I don't know if anyone else is having problems there, but your sound is cutting in and out, and I'm only catching every third word. But I'd certainly be happy to put you in contact or answer your question, put it out to everybody afterwards in an email. Definitely was not cutting you off there, Jane. Does anyone have any other questions at all that they'd like to throw out to Peter or Peter? No? All right. In the interest of keeping on time, because I do love that, I might wrap it up there. Thank you so much to everyone that joined us today. We had 25 people out of the 46 that joined live, which is a fantastic rate and kind of shows that there's a lot of interest around this subject. So I'll be making sure that I pass that on to the rest of the WALN team. All of the links and resources, as well as if I have permission from both the Peters to provide their presentations, as well as a copy of the recording, will go out to you in an email in a few days' time. And I will reach out to Jane if she registered for the event and make sure that we can follow up on her concerns there. Attached to the email will also be a link to the WA Landcare's membership opportunity. I know when I had a look at the people that joined today, there were some non-members, and we would absolutely love to have you join the collective voice for Landcare in WA. We'll also send out a short survey today, which will give you the opportunity to provide us with feedback on today's session. So it'll only take you a minute or so to fill out. So please do that for me. And we're currently developing both a Landcare Checks In and a Landcare Build Skills for October. So please keep an eye on our socials for when they are finalised for promotion and registration. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining, and I hope everybody has a good week. Peta Lierich,